Welcome to the Bible Savvy Podcast, a weekly conversation about how to understand, enjoy, and apply God's Word. It's time to jump into a new passage from the Bible Savvy reading plan.
Hello, Bible Savvy Nation. Welcome back. I'm here with Courtney and David. David, what's our banter question today?
All right, guys. This one comes from our Central Community Group's pastor, Daniel Small.
All right. Friend of the podcast, Daniel Small.
Yes.
Friend of the podcast.
He asks, if NASA was testing if people could live on Mars, but it was generally safe to do so, would you volunteer?
I'm going to say no. First of all, there's that qualifier. It's generally safe.
Generally safe.
Yeah.
Like the way a car is generally safe, or
Yeah. I mean, an airplane, you're flying in a
No
metal
wild
tube in the
animals
sky. That's
that we know
generally
of.
safe. But
You know.
I got nothing to prove. I'm good.
What
Okay.
if your life was totally different? What if like you weren't responsible for kids at church and your own kids and your own family? What if you're like, this is like 18-year-old Courtney Wilson, just life ahead of her. She's done with high school.
Whoa.
Would you be like, yeah, this could be a cool experience?
I mean, there's so much on Earth that I have not explored. I am quite content.
Okay.
Okay, I feel like I'm obligated as someone who has loved all things space my whole life to say, well, of course I would.
Yeah.
But then you think about the actual experience of it, and you're like, anything that is like that, it's like being a pioneer.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And like, I don't think I'd want to go like live in a Conestoga wagon either, even though that's on Earth with like breathable air and stuff.
How about Biodome? Let's
Biodome.
just go to Biodome.
And I did not expect to mention Pauly Shore this early in the podcast because he comes up so often. But here's a question. It's generally safe. What are they testing if it's already known to be generally safe?
Yeah.
I'm suspicious of this invitation.
Well, I cannot speak for our group's pastor, Daniel Small, and his intent. My assumptions is that they're testing when he said generally safe, maybe it meant like good and healthy. Like you could technically get in a tent and live on the mountain side, but is it healthy and good for you to do so long term?
It's generally
maybe
safe.
Generally safe. Generally safe.
It's generally
testing.
safe. There are wild animals and
Okay,
things.
so what's your answer?
So part of me would ask, how long does it take me to get to Mars?
What's the car ride on this one?
Right, because do you know? Isn't there? There's got to be some.
It's a
fact
long
out there.
time. I'm pretty sure it's like on the order of years.
Oh gosh, see that would probably ruin it for me if it took me that long.
I'd have to go look that up, but it's not.
Mars
It's
just
not.
to live
It's
there
not
for a little
days.
bit.
It's like
Right.
months or years.
Like if this was like going to Florida, it's like it's like a 2-day drive, and like I'll get there and live there for a bit to give them some data. Absolutely, I would do that. But if you told me I had to give up years just to get to the place that I don't know how great it's going to be, like if it was a vacation style trip, I mean, I'd give up, a month or two with my wife's permission to go live on Mars.
To go live on Mars for just just a little while.
But I'm not if I have to travel for years.
No, I think that's sad to say this. I think it's a no.
Nothing. I'll watch the TV show.
Yeah, I mean,
I'd watch the reality show
of David on
people
Mars.
living on Mars.
Survivor Mars edition.
I would be
there you
like,
go.
sure, I'll tune in.
Camp Probst.
I will
You're
watch.
getting voted off the planet. That's something.
A couple of years back.
All right, here we go. We are in 2 Samuel chapter 1. So technically we're in a new book of the Bible, but technically we're also not, because Samuel's really a 2-part book. They just split it in half because scrolls aren't long enough to hold the whole thing. So a little bit of context. As always, go back and watch the Bible Project video. Go back and listen to our interview with Dr. Bill Arnold, who wrote a commentary on the whole thing. Really helpful for this. The immediate context for this chapter is that Saul has died. So the previous king, who had fallen out of favor with God, basically crashes and burns. And his final act is he's going to a battle, and in the battle, he is injured, and he's there dying on the battlefield. And he tells, like his armor bearer, like his assistant there, you just got to put me out of my misery, run me through. The armor bearer is like, I don't want to do that. And so Saul falls on his sword. And so Saul is gone. And now David is in line to become the next king. So essentially, with Saul out of the way, David is about to take the throne. He hasn't quite been like kind of crowned, but everybody knows he's the next guy. So that's where we pick up in verse 1 of chapter 1.
After the death of Saul, David returned from striking down the Amalekites and stayed in Ziklag for 2 days. On the third day, a man arrived from Saul's camp with his clothes torn and dust on his head. When he came to David, he fell to the ground to pay him honor. "Where have you come from?" David asked him. He answered, "I have escaped from the Israelite camp." "What happened?" David asked. "Tell me." "The men fled from the battle," he replied. "Many of them fell and died, and Saul and his son Jonathan are dead." Then David said to the young man who brought him the report, "How do you know that Saul and his son Jonathan are dead?" "I happened to be on Mount Gilboa," the young man said, "and there was Saul leaning on his spear with the chariots and their drivers in hot pursuit. When he turned around and saw me, he called out to me, and I said, 'What can I do?' He asked me, 'Who are you?' 'An Amalekite,' I answered. Then he said to me, 'Stand here by me and kill me. I'm in the throes of death, but I'm still alive.' So I stood beside him and killed him, because I knew that after he had fallen, he could not survive. And I took the crown that was on his head and the band on his arm, and have brought them here to my Lord." Then David and all the men who with him took hold of their clothes and tore them. They mourned and wept and fasted till evening for Saul and his son Jonathan, and for the army of the Lord and for the nation of Israel, because they had fallen by the sword. David said to the young man who brought him the report, "Where are you from?" "I am the son of a foreigner, an Amalekite," he answered. David asked him, "Why weren't you afraid to lift your hand to destroy the Lord's anointed?" Then David called one of his men and said, "Go, strike him down." So he struck him down, and he died. For David had said to him, "Your blood be on your own head. Your mouth testified against you when you said, 'I killed the Lord's anointed.'" David took up his lament concerning Saul and his son Jonathan, and he ordered that the people of Judah be taught this lament of the bow. It is written in the book of Jashar. "A gazelle lies slain on your heights, Israel. How the mighty have fallen. Tell it not in Gath, proclaim it not in the streets of Ashkelon, lest the daughters of the Philistines be glad, lest the daughters of the uncircumcised rejoice. Mountains of Gilboa, may you have neither dew nor rain, may no showers fall on your terraced fields. For there the shield of the mighty was despised, the shield of Saul, no longer rubbed with oil. From the blood of the slain, from the flesh of the mighty, the bow of Jonathan did not turn back, the sword of Saul did not return unsatisfied. Saul and Jonathan, in life they were loved and admired, and in death they were not parted. They were swifter than eagles, they were stronger than lions. Daughters of Israel, weep for Saul, who clothed you in scarlet and finery, who adorned your garments with garments of gold. Oh, how the mighty have fallen in battle. Jonathan lies slain in your heights. I grieve for you, Jonathan, my brother. You were very dear to me. Your love for me was wonderful, more wonderful than that of women. How the mighty have fallen. The weapons of war have perished."
All right. The next step in comma is observations. So what do we see in this passage?
All right. Something striking to me was just right in verse 2, where this Amalekite comes to David and falls to the ground to pay him honor. And I think it's just striking because it's confusing to me, because the Amalekites were at odds with Israel. And so this whole scene just feels strange. Like his clothes are torn. So part of it's like, was it because of the battle? Was it because of grief? Because that's a repeated, thing that like people tear their clothes when they're in grief. So that part's confusing. Like, is he trying to act like he's in grief? Is he trying to earn points, or like, is he betraying the Amalekites? Like that whole thing is just the whole setup to this is very strange to me.
Yeah, well, and it says that David just returned from striking down the Amalekites, and so like this is very fresh. That this is not just like, well, we're suspicious of each other. It's like, no, we're literally fighting each other right now.
Yeah. Well, and I think it is important to have the context of Saul had said previously that he struck down the Amalekites, and I feel like that's.
Yeah, so Saul had fought the Amalekites, and David had been fighting the Amalekites. So actually, well, this is where we break the time thing. At the moment of recording this, I've not preached this message, but I'm pretty sure the weekend before this episode comes out, I will have preached a message about David fighting the Amalekites, and it's like a few chapters before this. So like it's it's very, very
Yes.
fresh there. One thing my observation, the big thing that I noticed in this whole conversation with the Amalekite is he's not telling the truth. Okay. So I said this in the context, but if you haven't read it recently or you didn't remember the details, Saul takes his own life. So the actual account on the ground is that Saul does ask one of his men to put him out of his misery, but Saul is the one who ends his own life. So this Amalekite we know as the readers, David doesn't know. He's just hearing a report that the Amalekite is casting himself in the story, saying, look at what I've done. So there's a number of things here that it's clearly this guy's like, hey, this is the new power in the area. So I'm going to bow down. I'm going to grovel. I'm going to be real friendly. And I'm going to let him know that I took care of your enemy for you. There's definitely some I'm wheeling and dealing here, trying to get something out of this.
Yeah. One of the notes that I just made is one of my favorite kind of Bible study writers. She always says you can trust the narrator and that you value the narrator's voice over the character.
Yes.
And so I wrote that in my margin to remind me as you're reading these things, you can always trust the narrator. And if you go a chapter back, trust what the narrator said, not what the Amalekite said.
Yeah, and it is one of the places where people who say it feels like there's contradictions in the Bible, sometimes that is one of the sources, is they're trusting a character's reporting. And it happens a number of times in Samuel. It's a thing that happens in the storytelling of this one a lot.
Yes.
Well, yeah, even in verse 10, it's just, I underlined the whole, and I took the crown that was on his head and the band on his arm, and I brought them here to my Lord. It's just, just his own back patting of, good, man, I did that. I got that for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just, it's, he has no clue that he's digging his own grave.
Well, and there's just holes in the story, right? Saul would not have been alone. And he says, basically, there was Saul, he's leaning on his spear. It's he never would have been alone.
Yeah.
Right? He would have had somebody with him. He was the king. There would have been somebody with him the whole time.
Yeah, there are things about it that are
So you just
questioning.
wonder, is David, listening to this going,
Well, but what's interesting is David seems to say, okay, I'll take it at face value.
Yeah.
And because he questions him a few times, and the guy's like, yeah, that's what happened. He's like, okay, if that's what happened, the Amalekite's assuming you're going to be super excited that I did this, but it's very surprising. The striking thing is not that the Amalekite didn't it's the fact that the Amalekite didn't get rewarded. Why would David, of all people, be like, I'm going to execute you for taking out Saul? You would think that it would be the one time, he does the just thing. This guy, deserves to be punished. But who would have thought David would have done that and been like, look, okay, great, thank you. That was very convenient for me. I don't have to deal with that now.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and in verse 12, where it says, they mourned and wept and fasted till evening for Saul and his son Jonathan. You would expect David to mourn and lament for Jonathan, but he lamented for Saul. And that was something striking to me, is that his immediate response is lament over someone who was trying to kill him.
Yeah.
Who was his pursuer.
Yeah.
And that he laments the loss of that.
I think it's worth noting, Jonathan, if someone hasn't been reading through, Jonathan is David's best friend. They've made a covenant together. They've sworn to always be there for each other, that, they're soldiers together. And the remarkable thing is Jonathan was loyal to David, even though Jonathan was supposed to be the heir to the throne. And so there's a deep bond here that's pretty profound.
Yeah. Verse 14, something striking. Why weren't you afraid to lift your hand to destroy not Saul, not the king, it's the Lord's anointed, which I think is a nudge to saying, hey, this was God's chosen person. And David is honoring the Lord in that statement of saying, this isn't a slight against Saul or a slight against David or a slight against Israel. This is a slight against God himself. And you weren't afraid. If I'm just thinking, if I'm that Amalekite, my heart sinks down to my belly at that moment of just saying, oh, I didn't know it was like that.
Yeah.
I didn't know that's where you would. I didn't know that's how you would react. I mean, it truly is that moment of gulp.
Yeah.
So.
I think David's phrase here, your own mouth has testified against you when you said, I killed the Lord's anointed. It's an interesting twist on the commandment, you should not bear false witness against your neighbor. The whole idea of that is that command is not simply about lying. It's also about in a court when you go and your word says, I was a witness to this thing, and so that person should be punished because of this thing I said. This guy's essentially doing it to himself. He's like bearing false witness against himself, and he gets himself in trouble. Like the irony of the whole thing is well, it's sweet but also gross. You know what I mean? Like it's just like sad.
Well, it's the irony of Saul said that he had struck down the Amalekites, and then an Amalekite lies and says that he struck Saul down.
Yes.
Like your past is going to haunt you at some point.
Yes.
That's like a direct echo. But moving, verse 17 starts into that lament, and it's really a beautiful lament. I think the striking thing, again, it was against it was for Saul and Jonathan, so he's lamenting Saul. But Clayton, it says it's written in the book of Jashar. There's other things that have been written in the book of Jashar, too, over the course of the Bible. So what is that?
Oh, I have a copy right here.
Pull that up for us. I'm just kidding. It's gone, right?
It's gone.
Lost.
We do not have anything that's called the book of Jashar. So this is the thing we got to remember. The ancient world had lots of books, and only so many things get preserved. And so one of the things that's hard for some people, especially when they are reading the Bible, is they want the archaeological or the documents that confirm certain things, but it's like 99% of all that existed in the ancient world was buried in some place that to be preserved, and 99% of that has been found, and or only 1% of it has been found. 99% is unfound. So like there are things where it's like we just don't have that. So there's no book of Jashar that we have. Maybe someday it'll turn up and we'll realize this was probably not.
Yeah,
but probably not.
Probably long gone.
And there are other books that are mentioned in the Bible, and some people are like, well, if we found that, would that be like, would we put it in the Bible? And it's like, no. God made sure we had the books that we needed, not the ones that we wish that we had. And who knows what else was in there that was reliable or not. But apparently it was a document they had. And apparently when the book of Samuel was written, would have been something they could refer to, which is also interesting because the people who received the book the first time could go and look and check the sources and that sort of thing.
Well, going into the lament too, I kind of nerd out on these kinds of things. So there's a lot of repeated words and phrases. In fact, they kind of echo each other in a pattern, but I don't know how far you want to go into that on laments. But one that I see is, oh, how the mighty have fallen, that phrase. And I think we tend to use that phrase now as like it's almost kind of sarcastic, like, oh, how the mighty have fallen. Yeah.
Yes,
but in this case, like he's lamenting. He's like the mighty, he's truly saying the mighty have fallen. Like that is, he's lamenting that. But lots of other repeating phrases. I'll let someone else talk about.
All right. There's a part I struggled with. Verse 23, Saul and Jonathan in life, they were loved and admired. And there was a part of this that felt like, if you go to a funeral and people are trying to come up with nice things to say about a mean person who lived a really harsh life. Yeah. And there was part of me that goes like, is this disingenuous? Like, is this like false honor toward Saul? I don't think it is, but it certainly feels that way with hearing him talk about Saul that way. Now, Jonathan, it's like, yeah, that makes complete sense. But there's a perspective I think that David has that I don't quite understand. Like how he could say that. And then also, by the way, order that all the people of Judah be taught this lament so that they're repeating this as well. Yeah. I don't know how you guys process that.
It is a tricky one. I think it's part of our challenge is that the book of Samuel is giving us a very narrow slice of these people's lives that we need to know to get the point of the book. Mm-hmm. But you have to remember David was being chased by Saul for a number of years, but he lived with Saul, served in his army for a while. He was married to his daughter. Mm-hmm. So there is a lot of history that we don't have the stories of. They're not part of the plot for this, but the time gap, like Saul reigned for 40 years. Mm-hmm. So what over the course of that time, like that means David is like, how old is he? I don't know, how old Saul, like the overlap, but like he's had some history. He has some time. Like David's lived some life with him and with his family. So there's he has a more robust picture of who Saul is, even though in the end, Saul turns against him, and he's got this weird, complex relationship. Like he can look back and say, I know some things about this man, and I also know what he's done for the country.
Yeah,
that was admirable.
Yeah,
and so it feels weird, but there's a lot. There's a complexity there.
Right.
Just some of the words that are used in the lament are kind of striking. I love the picture in verse 21 where it says, "For there the shield of the mighty was despised, the shield of Saul no longer rubbed with oil." Just that idea of anointing for one piece, like oil and anointing, but also my understanding anyway is that a shield, like if it had not been rubbed with oil, it would get cracks in it.
Yeah, it's a leather shield.
It's a leather shield.
Don't think like a metal
so it becomes
shield. Yeah.
cracked. And I thought, how interesting that like if it's not rubbed with oil, it becomes cracked. And he's saying it's no longer rubbed with oil. There's cracks in it.
Yeah, there's lots of imagery in here. You know, the dew, the rain hasn't fallen. Like he's like, expanding to like draw in like nature, almost weeping for the loss of these men. But what's interesting is he talks to the daughters of the Philistines. Is like, I don't want them to gloat, but then he turns to the daughters of Israel and says like, weep over this because Saul did all this. He brought, he clothed you in scarlet and finery. He adorned you with garments and ornaments of gold. Like it's a little bit probably exaggerated imagery. I'm not sure like everybody in Israel is like wealthy because but there was a sense of this was someone who contributed something and the loss of him is something that we'll miss, but he uses that imagery with all of that.
Hey, Clayton.
Yeah. Another one.
There's a verse, verse 26. I grieve for you, Jonathan, my brother. You were very dear to me. Your love for me was wonderful, more wonderful than that of women. Now that is a strange statement to hear from one man to another.
Yeah.
In a friendly way. That's not something that we would say, and quite frankly has been debated about the Bible's views on homosexuality. There have been times when this has been pointed to as, well, was there a homosexual relationship here?
Yeah.
How do you respond?
Yeah. So, it's a worthy question. I understand why people ask it. So, I don't want my answer to be dismissive of that because when we read some of the things that are said there, in our context, earlier in chapters where it's like, like we made a covenant together, which the only covenants we have are basically marriage and adoption. So like to say like, we're going to commit our lives to each other. And then to say your love is more wonderful than that of women. Like in our context, there's a reason to think, well, there's something more than just what we would call friendship here. The challenging part for us is that our modern sense of what friendship can be is pretty impoverished, especially between people of the same gender. And so we can't, like the only truly committed intimate relationships that we can imagine are sexual. And so we think, well, that must include that element in it because in our society, we don't really have those kinds of relationships with people. And that's actually our problem, right? Like it's not actually us understanding reality. It's us missing a part of reality. So if you look at most ancient cultures that reflect on friendship, they will actually elevate the relationship of people of the same gender having a close bond with each other as something like a beautiful thing to achieve in your life. And so this is like you go ancient Greece, you go to all sorts of places. Now, for those of you who know history, okay, like there are some complicated parts where they do actually include a sexual element to some of those things, but it didn't always. And it's very common to find letters between soldiers who served together or between people who are partners in some sort of like work or business, like people that you like these lifelong friends, like even in American history, like you go, like you find things between like presidents and their friends and whatever. And you're like, this is very, like, I wouldn't say that to one of my guy friends, even my closest guy friends, I would have a hard time saying some of these words. But most cultures before this said these relationships are genuine, real. And if in your life you can achieve one of those, what a great gift. So in this case, I think we've got a picture of David and Jonathan, who their relationship is forged in some really intense stuff. And that, like, like C.S. Lewis, he talks about like 4 loves, right? He talks about like affection that you have like for your brothers and sisters and family. You've got eros, which is like romantic love. You have like divine love, like a selfless commitment kind of thing. But then there's friendship, and the other ones are ones that like you kind of can't, you like they kind of just come upon you, right? Like you just, you have the family you have, you fall in love with who you fall in love with, like you know God or whatever. But friendship, it's kind of optional, right? Like you can go through your life and never have those kinds of friendship. And so because of that, ancient people would look at friendship and say, it's not given. You have to go for it. And so if you find someone that you can bond with over these shared things, that's like, it's almost the highest level, because the other ones, most people achieve those, but that one takes a certain kind of work and deliberate action to do it. So I actually think David and Jonathan is not a picture of sexual romantic love that we need to wrestle through, but like something we should say, oh dear, how, like, what could I aim for that in my life, to have someone that was that close that when they were gone, I would feel this way about them. You know, and then of course there's poetic language. So your love is more wonderful than the love of women. Right. It isn't really saying, you know, like, well, I love you more than I love my wife. It's saying like, no, our closeness was closer than what you'd expect in many marriages. You know, like there was a tightness there. So we still got to wrestle with it, but it's not what we think it means.
Yeah, I think that's why the C in comma is so important, the context clues. Yeah. Because I have to remind myself often when I'm reading the Bible that I'm reading with 2025 American eyes and perspective, and my experience of the world is very different than those that lived in this time.
Yeah. And let's be clear. If the Bible wanted us to know that this was that kind of relationship and that was a good thing, right? Like everything about David and Jonathan is a positive vision. So if the Bible was saying this is a positive vision for this kind of relationship and it include a sexual element, and the Bible was okay with that, the Bible is not shy about saying those things. Like the things that need to be said, but it doesn't say that. And so like if that's what it was really about, reading between the lines is not where you would find it. You would just say it. And so we must misunderstand it if it didn't quite do it like that. Yeah. All right, we're going to turn the corner to one of the M's in common. We're going to talk about meditation first. I think with this genre of scripture where you got lament poetry, it's really helpful for us to feel the permission to cry out to God with lament. So for meditation, I want us to take some time to lament over someone that you've lost. Like we've all lost people, whether it's recent or in the past, but the sense of missing someone who once was present in your life is something I think most people can relate to. So take 45 seconds and simply call out to God. Tell God how you feel about the loss of someone in your life. All right, let's turn to the other M in comma. Let's talk about message. If you're going to take something you saw in this passage, sum it up in a principle, what would it be?
Yeah, my message was faithful friendship is precious. I really, as I read through this, one of the things that I really was struck by and latched onto is that idea of Jonathan's faithfulness and how loyal he was. I mean, he was loyal to Saul, he was loyal to David. And I think that's how you get a friendship that is that close. There's an integrity there. Again, I was just very struck by that section in verse 26. I grieve for you, Jonathan, my brother. He calls him his brother, even though they were, friends. You're very dear to me. Your love for me is wonderful, more wonderful than that of women. Like I do look at that and think like, man, that is a close and precious friendship. And so in the loss of a friend, that was the message that really struck me, was faithful friendship is really precious.
Yeah. My message is lament is the bridge between our emotions and God's will. So based on, the fact that Saul died, David was clearly emotional about it. And if we had David in a vulnerable state, there was clearly grief, but there's probably a little relief that his wandering and wondering if Saul would catch up to him and kill him was over. And so, but David's goal wasn't to celebrate Saul's death. It was to lament that God's choice for the king, the one who had been anointed, had rejected God. So lament is that, like, what do I do with my emotions? I lament. It brings me into God's will.
Mm-hmm.
My message is find ways to honor people with a mixed and messy track record. So this is the part that made us uncomfortable about him singing the song for Saul, is that we know what Saul did. We know that he was not a good man or a good leader in the, like, that, he had some very flawed things that ruined him. And yet David finds a way to honor him. And I think that for all of us, there are people in our lives where we say, this is not so simple as they were just a great person. You get to their funeral and you just tell all the stories about how wonderful they were, and their flaws are small enough in your eyes that you can sort of just say, that was the story about them. There are people in our lives where we say, I don't know what to feel about them. Mm-hmm. And David did the thing of saying, I'm going to find a way to honor Saul, even though he could tell you all the messy things about who he was. So that's my message. Mm-hmm. All right, let's go to the A and comma. Let's talk about application. What do you do in light of your message?
Yeah. Well, my message was faithful friendship is precious. And my application is really pretty simple within that, to kind of take that assessment of where are those really faithful friendships that I have, the ones I don't think you end up with hundreds of those in your lifetime, right? Like, you have those people that you will always, that you always seem to come back to. There's some integrity to that relationship. There's a loyalty and a faithfulness that just can't be mistaken. And so really taking that assessment of, like, who are those people that I really need to care for that friendship? I really need to nurture it at the end of life. I mean, these are some of the longest relationships you will have, right? I tell my kids that in relation to being siblings. I say all the time, like, your sibling is the longest relationship you'll have in your lifetime, so take care of it. And I think of that for friends that I have. Like, some of my friends will be my friends for longer than anyone else in my lifetime. They'll have known me all the way through. And so I think of friends of mine, that the people who led me to Jesus and discipled me in my early years, those are still dear and precious friends to me. These are people who I'm just incredibly close to. But how could I nurture that even more? How could that be? What does it look like to not lose touch with people? What does it look like to continue to be that really faithful, integritous friend and have those kinds of relationships? So for me, it's really more of a reflection, and then also kind of like that reaching out and contacting those people, staying in touch with them. I'm always amazed at the ways that God keeps those relationships grounded and together, no matter how far apart you may be. So,
you ever hear the joke where it said the two greatest miracles of Jesus were rising from the dead and having 12 close friends in his 30s? Like, yeah, it's hard. It takes work.
It's true.
Work.
But when you find those people, like, it's so precious. Like, those are the people who I know will be with me, forever.
That's good.
Yeah.
David, what's your application?
So my message was lament is the bridge between our emotions and God's will. And so the application is pretty obvious. Keep space in my spiritual rhythms for lament. The reality is, as you were kind of talking about, Clayton, we have complicated, complex relationships. So when we're sitting at a funeral and it's like we don't feel all butterflies or all negative things, and it's a mixture of things, it's acknowledging that that's okay. And lament is the path forward, in which we can experience a little bit more of the presence of God. And I want to get real practical for a moment, because one of the things I think we neglect to acknowledge is that at this time in history, when prayer happened, like lament prayer or just prayer in general, it was out loud. Mm-hmm. A lot of our prayer life in 2025 America is silent. It's in our minds. It's quiet. And I think because of that, I think we do miss out on some of the like the emotion that can come with a good lament prayer. And so I just want to remind I've done this in the past, but sometimes I lose that rhythm, and I just want to sort of remind myself and give people permission to lament out loud and find your space to do that. For me, it's often in my car because I know nobody can hear me, and I can drive down Randall Road and lament my prayer and you tell God all the things that I feel and be honest with Him. You know, sometimes it's like if the family's gone from the house and I'm home alone, and I'm like, I just feel that kind of permission to just say those things out loud that I'm frustrated by, the circumstances, the sicknesses, the illnesses, the hospitalizations, all the things that just bother me, and allow God to hear that and then just kind of help me process through my emotions. So I think that's a really important part of lament.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's good. My message is find ways to honor people with a mixed and messy track record. And one of the tools that I use, and you and I talk about this a lot actually, is to retell the story that you have about someone and recognize that you often cast people in a certain role in that story. You like to use language like, are they the hero, the victim, or the villain, those sorts of things. And you can tell the story in different ways depending on where you think people are. I like to use the language that everybody, there's 4 things that are true of everybody. We're all sinners. We're all victims. We all suffer. We all are gifted. We bring something to the table, and we're all beloved. We're all precious in God's sight. And those 4 things are not mutually exclusive. They're all true of everybody. And so when we have a messy relationship with somebody, or a relationship with someone who is messy, what can happen is you can put them in just one of those boxes, right? Like, so it could have been easy for David to say, Saul was just a villain. He was just a sinner. He's just in that box, and not recognize the other aspects of who he was. And so sometimes the application for how do you honor somebody that you have reasons to not want to honor is that you have to say, I'm not going to deny the sinful things they did. The things that make them a villain sometimes in my story, that's true. You don't have to deny that in order to recognize the other things, but you can say, they're gifted in some way. They brought something. There was something in Saul's leadership that was good for this country. There was something in knowing Saul that David said he was somebody important in my life, and you can do that. And I think most of the time the hardest people are family members or people that are really close to us because you probably know all the messy stuff. But I think that's really important. And there are a lot of people who, when a parent dies or they're kind of out of the house or whatever, and they don't know how to sort all that out, and they'll swing between, like, when they were a kid they thought they could do no wrong, and then they just think, well, they can do no right. And to somehow work out a way of saying, I can honor the good and also recognize that they're a sinner just like me, and not deny one part of that story for the other. There's a real mature place, and it actually helps you love and honor a person without denying the truth.
Thanks for hanging out with us. Join us again next Monday for a new episode where we'll be looking at another passage from the Bible Savvy reading schedule. And in the meantime, if you're not following along with the reading plan, check out BibleSavvy.com. Also, you can subscribe and leave a review on whatever platform you're listening or watching on. Email us your questions or suggestions at podcast@BibleSavvy.com. Lastly, tell your friends, and we'll talk to you next week.